Hello, everyone. Welcome to our part three of our mental health series for this summer on mental health and the ministry. And today we're going to be talking about integrating, rather supporting ourselves and others with mental health challenges. And again, we are honored to have Dr. Grant Jones, a psychologist, and Nathan Davis, psychologist, and Dr. Beth Davis, counselor. And they're going to lead us through a very, very important time of reflecting on how we can support ourselves, how we can take care of ourselves, what are the basics of self-care that we need to be aware of, and then also as we live in community, how we can be aware of helping other people as well, whether we are in pastoral ministry, perhaps missions, or we're in the marketplace. We have relationships, and God calls us not to live in isolation, but also be a blessing to other people. So as we care for ourselves, we also want to be aware of others around us as well. I want to take this time at the beginning of this particular webinar just to look ahead to next month, to August the 7th, which is a Wednesday at noon Central Time in the United States. We are going to be talking about part four, our final in this series on mental health and ministry. And we're going to be talking about integrating faith, spiritual forces of darkness, and mental health. How do we discern when something is biological, it's an issue of a matter of psychology, needing counseling, or perhaps there are some dark forces from the enemy at work as well? How do we discern that? How do we discern if it's something spiritual and perhaps not psychological, though we know the enemy plays on these kinds of things and wants to take advantage of us in any way that he can? And so next month, we're very excited to talk about mental health in the ministry, integrating faith, spiritual forces of darkness, and mental health. But for today, I'm going to turn it over to our expert panel that we have with us, and we're going to begin with Dr. Jones. And let's talk about mental health and the ministry supporting ourselves and others with mental health challenges. So, Dr. Grant, we pass it to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Let me pull it up here. Screen share. Welcome, everybody. What a pleasure, honor to get this going. There we go. We've the first two podcasts that we've had, we've really focused on research and on self-care, taking care of ourselves as ministers and care professionals. And so I want to review just briefly some of those key points and then move into some real specific self-care strategies that we can use, all of us can use, but my primary focus will be on ministers and missionaries and those that care for God's kingdom. So I'm just going to do that quickly, and then the second part, I'll pause at the end, then Nathan and Beth then will do their part, and then I will come back and start a little bit of our focus for next week on mental health issues. So that's kind of the plan. If you have questions, please put those in the chat link or whatever. I don't know how to do that stuff that well, but Mark will help me out with that. So first of all, real quick, here's the outline for what I'm going to do. What does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? What is a good working definition of love? And then I'll really focus on the 4 effective strategies for biblical self-care. The second part, causes of mental illness. By the numbers, some of the major causes, and then we'll focus on the biological, physical, genetic causes, and then we'll have some conclusions setting us up for next week. So here's my definition of love. Some of you have already seen this, but I really hone in on this. Love is doing what is best for the person or creating an opportunity for the person to become a better person without either one's integrity or personhood being harmed or compromised. Loving behavior improves the lives of both giver and recipient. If either one is harmed, then it's not love, because love ultimately makes people better individuals, better people, and they grow and they heal. Why love thy neighbor as thyself? Because it makes your body healthier. The Lord knew this. And so here's the research, large effect size between self-compassion and lower levels of psychopathology. Self-compassion really lowers your state level, of the stress hormone cortisol. We're going to talk about how cortisol stress actually impacts mental health issues, causes mental health issues, and even pseudo physiological issues. Self-compassion increases your heart rate variability. So you can self-soothe, self-regulate a lot easier. It does, self-compassion affects your psychobiological threat system. And there's some really good research there on that. And then self-compassion, I want you to look at this. Self-compassion was significantly negatively correlated with clergy burnout. 2011 study. Documented, empirical. So the more self-compassion you have, the less likely you will burn out. Okay, so setting healthy boundaries, seeing ourselves as God sees us. This is how we love ourselves. It's so hard for people to really love themselves. They think they're doing something wrong, but it's biblical. Created in his image, his eternal child, we're blameless and complete. Doing things that make us better people, make us feel good about being productive, being energized, creating beauty, being nice, kind, and forgiving, encouraging, and merciful to self. Do you know of anybody? Well, there are issues, but most of us are much more compassionate on other people's mistakes and failures and wrongdoing than we do to ourselves. Practicing good self-care, taking better care of our basic needs, recharging activities, and nourish self daily through healthy activities like sound nutrition, exercise, proper sleep, intimacy, and healthy self-interactions. We honor, protect, and care for the things that we love. So if we love ourselves, we will honor and protect and care for ourselves. And that makes us better Christ's ambassadors. So here's where I want to start. All right. And this is geared towards ministers. I understand that missionaries, because we have, as I shared in podcast 1, webinar 1, those that care for the flock are at greater risk of harm by them for themselves than those that don't care for the flock. Because we have that biblical mandate to go into all the world, teach, preach, disciple, and heal. And so first of all, identify the reasons why you are doing what you're doing. What is your calling? Not even put in, even if you're retired, what is your calling? I'm kind of in that boat now. So why are you doing what you do? What is the foundational philosophical roots to your raison d'etre? And so I encourage all of us to write a mission statement, regardless of our stage in life. So write that mission statement. Let that be your guide. And it shouldn't be more than a paragraph. And it has to be adjusted, updated. But that should be your guide. What gives you purpose and meaning? What gives you fulfillment? What are you doing to do that, to give, besides the ministry? That's important, but other things as well. What gives you purpose and meaning? What makes you smile? So many of my clients, they're at a point, I don't know what I'm doing with my life now. And you can see the depression, anxiety, and they're stuck. What needs are being met in this mission statement and your calling? I put this in here. Many of us carry, as ministers, as a missionary kid, that sense of we always got to be doing something for the kingdom. Are we doing that to advance the kingdom or to treat our own, what I call toxic shame? Are we trying to be perfect? Are we trying to earn our salvation? Are we trying to prove to God that I am a good enough Christian and I'm a good enough servant? And if that's driving you, then you will burn out. You will hurt. So this first part is to say, am I a human being? Is what I'm doing to heal myself, or is what I'm doing to further the kingdom and create beauty? What gives you purpose? Write it down. These are the things that make you smile, make you get up in the morning, make you face the day. Make sure that that's clear in your mind. And so I'm staying here. What's your reason for what are you doing? Is it to advance the kingdom, or is it to kind of heal or fix yourself or make yourself look good in some sense? Number 2, identify the top 3 stressors or challenges of your ministry, your profession. What are the top three, not 5, 10? What are the top three things that really plague you, bother you, get you kind of off your game? And here's some questions, and each one of us have to go through this. All right. Is it part of the job? In other words, is it normal? Is that normal stress that any person in this position would experience? It comes with the job. Um, if it is normal, then you figure out ways to address it and deal with it without shaming yourself. And then you ask the question, is it something, could these things be modified? How can we mitigate or manage them? May not be eliminated, but mitigate, manage them so that they don't have that full effect of derailing us. If it can be modified, do it. If not, then you have to do some acceptance to manage it. Is it related to leadership style or work culture? Many of us have lived in or worked in environments with lots of personalities and different leadership styles. And some we like and some we don't. Some cultures are healthy and other cultures are not healthy. So this stress, these stressors, identify if it's directly related to a person's leadership style or group of leadership style or something else. Or is it just the work culture? These are harder to change. Unless you're in a leadership role, then you have that opportunity to change leadership style and your work culture. And is it in you? Is it our own attitude, our own personality? Each of us are unique individuals. And one of those things that we have to look in the mirror and say, is it me or is it not me that's causing this issue? Is it my issue or is it something more? Is it my attitude or person that's creating this stress in my life? Everybody knows that working in kingdom work is very stressful. Just the nature of the job without even worrying about the culture. So do an assessment. And I have an issue. I mean, I have something coming up here to help address this because all of us have a dark side, a blind side, a shadow side that we're not always aware of or we don't want to take a look at. And it could be part of that, and if you bring some awareness to that, then you will become a healthier person. You will become a healthier person if you address your humanity that all of us have the impact from the fall. And then this is one that, I have to work at this. Do I have a Messiah complex? Am I always trying to fix everything? And the answer is yeah. Sometimes I have to tell my clients, I'm sorry. I just need to listen. I'll try not to fix. I'll just listen for a while. And when I hear things going on in the world and organizations, I want to do something. I want to get involved. And I have to be careful that I'm not doing that because I'm elevating myself, but because I really want to help people that are hurting. And can I do that? So 2 strategies to cope. Write out your mission statement. This defines and guides all your activities. I love what Rick Warren did in Purpose Driven Life. I used that years ago. That saved me from trying to save the world and just focus on what I have influence over. This clearly protects us from overextending ourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. Most of us love to be generous with our funds, and every Sunday someone asks for more funds, and I feel guilty if I don't. But then if I know what my purpose is, my 5 top criteria for that, then that guides me in what I can give my money to and my time and resources to. We're all finite, folks. We're all finite. And so we have to accept our humanity because the Lord sure does. And that's why he tells us to do self-care. The second part, identify a couple folks that you value and trust and be accountable. How often do ministers meet with other ministers or congregants besides their board members? And I want to ask this person, you know me, give me feedback. Here's what I'm thinking. Am I in or out of my processes in being accurate or not accurate? So when you have these stressors, you address it with somebody that really knows you, values you, and that can be trusted. Meet regularly. Um, Give feedback if perceptions are inaccurate or accurate. Here's the part that some of us are really in a bind. Okay? And we did this spiritual abuse webinar back in January. And so if there's a systemic issue in the organization, how do you address that? And that's where you start talking about it as a group, trusted individuals, to develop a strategy. Um, we have stress in all aspects of ministerial work. Absolutely. Lots of personalities. But if there's a systemic issue, you need to address it as such and talk about it as a group, a safe group. And if it's a job issue, then have staff meetings with an expert teacher, consultant to say, hey, here is what our church is like. Here's where our issues are at. What can we do? We bring in some consultant to address it straight up. Houston, we have a problem, and let's see what we can do to do something about it. Because we're dealing with kingdom work, gang. We're dealing with kingdom work. And so the healthier you are as a leader, the healthier your group will be, the healthier your ministry will be. It flows out. I've seen this so many, many times in my private practice where I'll have a client, he or she gets well, and then it spreads into the family, the extended family, and their work. One person healing, changing does make a difference and can make a difference. Now, here, this is my last slide for this section. Personal self-care. I give credit to Don Triplett, who he and I worked together years ago during School of Missions, and we had this saying, what you feed will grow. This is what we told the MKs and ourselves. What you feed will grow. So these are things that have been documented to do. If you can start implementing these, you will change. In fact, what you eat, if you have amino acids, tryptophan, and tyrosine, that will make you less depressed. Just what you eat has an impact because your brain needs those amino acids. So find time to be alone just for 15 minutes a day. No screen time, no talk with anybody. If you can do it, get a hot tub. That's what I do. I get a hot tub and my 15 to 30 minutes there, and it's like I'm rejuvenated. Eat healthy, duh. Sleep at least 7 hours a night. I'll ask those that I'm talking to now, how many of you slept 7 hours last night? Um, 5 days of 15 to 20 minutes of a walk, exercise. Activate cortisol or dopamine to help in the body. Do something fun each day for at least 15, 30, and tell yourself, this is self-care. I'm not taking away from my Bible reading. I'm not taking away from my prayer time. I'm not taking away from evangelism or reading, studying. This is what my body needs to do to do self-care. It's biblical. It's spiritual to do this. Talk to your friend, spouse, 15 minutes a day. I encourage my couples, families, 15 minutes in the evening after the kids gone to bed or everything, just sit at the table. What you doing? What's happening? 15 minutes, simple as that. If you're married, try to have at least one date night a week. If not, at least once a month. I'm trying to think when I saw my mom and dad go on a date on the mission field. I don't remember one. I mean, it may have been, but I don't remember it. And so I had to learn that. Praise God for my psychology training. It helped me to see some other things that needs to happen. Oh, here's another one. Just with your kids, 15 minutes playing with each one. Whatever he or she wants to do. 15 minutes. It changes the vector, the relationship, and it creates something with your child that's very meaningful. Take your 2 days a week off, your sabbatical. Crickets. But anyway, I know. So anyway, it makes sense. And then here's the other thing. This one I really love to talk about because I came across this during my internship at a VA hospital, and I was doing research, and I came across a study that separated what was the one defining feature that separated delinquent boys from non-delinquent boys. And it was thousands of cases, and they came up with one major difference between that predicted which boy would become delinquent or not. And it was the non-delinquent boys' families took at least one vacation a year. That's it. And it could be at a lake, it could be a tent, it could be a resort. It didn't matter. That 1 week made a difference in whether the boy became a delinquent or a non-delinquent. And ever since I came across that, we have made that a priority in our family for years. And even if you can hardly afford anything, just get a tent and go to a national park or something, because and they dug down. And why? Because why it was effective? The kids recognize we are important to mom and dad. They want to do something special for us. And so, and come on, baby. There we go. What you feed will grow. We are finite human beings who can't do it all. Even Jesus didn't do it all. Doing self-care and self-compassion makes you a more effective witness and servant in the kingdom, and it's biblical. Know why you are going into the mystery, serving him or fixing yourself. All axes and chainsaws eventually needed sharpened, and batteries need recharged to do their jobs. My son tried to use the boat that we have, and I haven't used it in a while, and battery dead. I'm thinking, okay, we didn't use it. How did it die? It just died. Praise God, it was under warranty and I could get a new one. After speaking and ministering at an event or a job, whether it was stressful or rewarding, do something fun, meaningful, and relaxing afterwards. I love it. I love it. I love it where pastors have and missionaries when they have Monday off. That to me is critical. You have a great day, you still have to find a way to de-escalate and unwind from that. And get a hobby and do something that just makes you smile, laugh, enjoy, feel good about it. My hobby is big game hunting, and my wife to this day still regrets saying, Grant, you got to get a hobby if you're going to retire. But I did get one, and it's very meaningful as a missionary kid to be able to fulfill my childhood dreams. And I think that's it. Oh, the healthier you are, the healthier your ministry will be. I will say that again. The healthier you are, the healthier your ministry will be. Amen.
Oh, thank you very much, Ray. Yes. Any questions that those that are on with us today may like to ask? Nathan and Beth, anything you'd like to also add, perhaps?
Please.
Oh, that's very, very comprehensive.
I'm not sure how things are done like in AGWM anymore, but I'll go back before we went into AGWM. But when I pastored the church that we church planted in the city of Chicago, uh, the church grew through people coming to faith. But we had 2 Sunday morning services, Sunday school in between. We had Thursday night, we had Sunday night in those days, and I could not wait for Monday, because Monday I took off. We were starting a new family and 3 little kids. And I remember our leadership, our superintendent at that time said, he couldn't wait to get into the office on Monday morning. And I initially thought something was wrong with me, because the last place I wanted to be on Monday morning was at the church. Even if we had the most glorious Sunday services, people were coming to Jesus and filled with the Holy Spirit and maybe experienced healing in some way, I was toast on Monday. And I look back on it. I took one day off a week. I wish I had taken 2. I was not that indispensable. But I love what you said, especially in area giving ourselves margins to rejuvenate. I think especially when we're young. Also, I'm 66 now. It's just my wife and me, and our kids are married and doing well, and we see the grandkids. But there's a lot more margins than there were in those days. But I wish I had taken more time off. And we need to think about these areas of self-care. It really does impact our mental health. So thank you, Grant. That was excellent. I see that we had a question came up. I want to make sure we take a look at that. Oh, well, Nancy wants to know if you bagged a buffalo.
Oh, there you go.
That's a good question. I like that.
Well, okay. Yes, I've done 6 Cape Buffalo.
Wow. Well, you were a big game hunter. Hey, don't Africa have like a certain top 5 big game animals?
Yes. Elephant, lion, leopard, rhino, and Cape buffalo.
Okay. How many of the 5 have you gotten?
3.
Okay. All right. Well, you can tell Rita you have still some more hunting to do in your hobby.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
public. Yeah, Nancy put me on the spot there because there's anyway, but that's my MK coming through with me. Yes.
well. I'm going to encourage those who are viewing and those that will see this. You know, it is recorded. We will embed this in the events archives. So go back if there's something that you missed on some points that you say that resonates with me. I do need to take care of myself. I do notice this in someone else. It could be a spouse, a close friend, somebody that you're doing ministry with, someone that you know and love as a friend. Go back and reflect on this or recommend the webinar to them to view it. And really, I think developing what Grant said about a mission for life is helpful. One of the things we also do at the Institute for Ministerial Wholeness is help people walk through developing a rule of life. And I'd be happy to talk to you about that as well. So let's go on now and move on to Nathan and Beth Davis. And they're going to be taking a different bent. And Nathan and Beth, why don't you share with us what you're going to be talking about?
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen first. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and go from, okay, hopefully you can see the airplane. If you don't see an airplane, then something is wrong. So what we're going to do is start talking about distorted thoughts. There are actually hundreds of different types of distorted thoughts. We're going to talk about the big 7, the main 7. We won't even get to all of them today. We'll probably get to 3 or 4 of them, and we can continue next session with that without any problem. So the bottom line is that most Christians don't just tell overt lies, but they do tell lies to themselves, which are distorted ways of thinking. And so they adopt distorted thinking patterns as a way to process what's going on around them. And a lot of times it's a distortion that's a lie to themselves, or sometimes they even use it as in their conversation with other people. So we tend to lie to ourselves, but there are definitely scriptures, and a couple here that really counteract that. So we're going to talk about these 7. We'll start with blaming, then going down to overgeneralizing, ending up with guessing fortunes. Today, we may get through with branding. I that won't get any further. We have embedded video clips, and our video clips are not working. The audio is working, but the video is not. So I will skip most of them. There are a few that the audio itself depicts what's going on. And for those, I'll go ahead and click on them so you can hear the audio. This first one, the video is what's important. So we're going to skip that because you can't see the video. But this really illustrates what blaming is all about. The guy says it's our supervisor's fault that this project failed. And the response there indicates that no one else did anything to help. And therefore, that's why they're blaming the supervisor. It's a lie. Blaming is a lie about who is responsible for what's going on, because the reality is that everyone on the team is responsible for what's going on. And when we blame someone else on our team, we're judging them, whether it's our spouse or someone else we work with. What we're saying is that that person caused the problem and they should be judged. And maybe we should talk about how they should be punished, or they should at least feel guilty. So it blocks us from exploring each person's story, the other person's story. And that's the main problem with blaming. It blocks us from exploring their side of the story. We think they're the problem. They think we're the problem. But we each have our own story that we don't discuss. And so when there's blaming, it's a lie about who's responsible. The reality is that both are responsible. Everyone on the team is responsible, but no one is taking responsibility. So there's two different types of blaming. One's called defensiveness. You've probably heard that before. Defensiveness rarely has a desired effect. Quite the opposite. The attacker simply ignores the excuse that's offered and that usually attacks more, usually taking the moral ground, a high ground, as a way to attack the person. So defensiveness rarely helps. We're going to skip through this. You can eliminate defensiveness by not arguing about who's right and who's wrong. Instead, look about what each person can do to contribute and solve the problem. What can we do to make sure things work? Not, who's wrong? How do you change that? What can we each do now to step forward? Sometimes we engage in self-blame. I was raised as an MK in Japan, and in that particular culture, self-blame is almost honored. But the reality is that it's a lie about who's responsible because it hides your good qualities. And again, it's not a team approach. And so self-blame is also a lie to yourself. So I want to end this little clip, this little bit, with a self-reflection on your part and my part. What's the last time you remember blaming someone? What's the last time you remember being blamed? You probably remember that quite vividly. But I want you to reflect on both. When was the last time you did blaming? And when was the last time you received blame? And think about these past things we talked about. And the way to attack it is a team approach, not accepting it as an individual action. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next, which is overgeneralizing. And Beth is going to go ahead and talk about that. This particular video clip, the audio is kind of self-explanatory, so you will not be able to see the video, but I'll click on the overstatement. You'll hear the audio. It's short, it's only 29 seconds, and you'll be able to get an example of what it's like, what overstatement is really like.
Your father has finally done it.
What's that? Buckle his pants?
Rich. That man has been sitting in front of the TV every day for 45 years. Get me this, get me that. You're clipping them too short. That ingrate can't stop hounding me for 5 minutes.
Okay, so hopefully you got the idea of what that's like. Now, of course, the question I have is how do I get back to the main video now?
Right. So I think as we tie this together to what Grant was saying earlier about caring for ourselves, this is a part of ourselves that a lot of people don't see, but we have to look deeper inside of ourselves to see and to listen to the way we speak to others. Overgeneralizing, or we can also call it overstating, is when we use one little instance to generalize something into a big global problem. It just was like what's happening in Everybody Loves Raymond. We identify this often by always and never statements. Things will always be a certain way, or they will never change. Yeah, this is a staff member is talking about how we bought new equipment and now we will never have money, never get out of debt. As we care for ourselves, part of caring for ourselves is listening to our own speech. And so I'm going to invite you as we go through these distortions to say, listen to our own talk as we talk to others, as we talk to ourselves. What are those overstatements that come out of our mouths? I have my favorites. You probably have yours. Not everybody does this. This is one of my favorites, to use always never. It sometimes feels like Nathan never takes out the trash, or I'm always the one to do a certain thing. Those are we learn those things as children, and we just take them through our adult years. And just like blaming, Nathan just talked about blaming. We learn these things very young, and unless we intentionally stop sometimes and listen to the words that are coming out of our mouths, we don't know how we are lying in instances like this. Never always is a good way. So I do invite you to just take a moment to say, when do I use some of these thought distortions? We use them on ourselves. Sometimes we say, I will always be in debt. I will never get it right. And other times we use them on other people, often on the people that we love the most. So I loved Grant's presentation of self-care, because I think those minutes that we spend alone, maybe in the hot tub, maybe in the recliner, are times when we can do some of this self-reflection to say, today I'm going to notice what I am saying, how I am saying it. Am I encouraging people, or am I blaming them? Or am I using a lot of these never always statements? That getting back and that slowing down in life is the only time that you really have to reflect on what's flowing out of your mouth all day long. Another favorite one is mind reading. This is something that we do without even thinking as well. You did a great job in this report. Uh-oh, he's getting ready to ask me to do something again. How easy it is to go to that negative interpretation of a statement that someone may have. We may feel like we know that person well enough. Often it is our best friends, our coworkers, our bosses, even our pastors. Sometimes the people that we feel like we know them so well that we know they might be saying this, but our clever minds can just interpret and say, they really are saying something else. And often, I have to say, it defaults to the negative. We don't assume that someone says something and often say, well, they really meant something better. We always kind of look at it and say, could be something worse. So that's, I like to identify mind reading with some phrases, and I try to take these sometimes into especially situations that have the potential for some kind of conflict. That if you hear people saying he thinks or she thinks, often we don't know what someone else is thinking. So that's an identification of mind reading is going on.
We're going to go ahead and show one really short video clip. You won't see the video, but the audio in this is what's important. And so just listen to the, again, it comes from the Everybody Loves Raymond video show, TV show. And so you'll hear those two actors, the husband and wife, talking. And I don't see it coming.
Yeah, we're having Thanksgiving here, and the Russians are coming.
Oh, great. That's what I wanted. Here.
Really? We'll see.
What do you mean?
Well, because my mom now said she'd be happy to come.
So what's wrong with her being happy?
Just think about it. This was supposed to be her year, right? The year that you're now taking. Everybody's going to be coming here, and she now knows that the star of your show is a fish. That makes her very happy.
Come on, what are you saying? That your mother's looking forward to my dinner being a flop?
I'm not saying she wants it to be a flop, but she doesn't want it to be better than hers. How's that going to look to Aunt Emma and Uncle Mel?
Whoa, 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 whoa. Emma and Mel are coming here?
Yeah, she had already invited them to her house.
And she's happy more people are coming, so there'll be witnesses when I fail.
That's what I'm thinking.
Oh my God, this is a trap. It's, oh, Emma and Mel. Oh, that Emma is so weird. And Mel is mean.
And weird.
Is it turning off now?
So
So that's such a great example of motives and assuming that we not only can mind read, but to go deeper and to go behind the thoughts, behind the words, and know what another person's motives are. Very tempting to do that. Again, as we know people well, and these are not strangers. These are usually our relatives or people that we work with every day.
or our spouse.
Certainly, yeah, certainly spouses, because we've watched them and we kind of like, oh, they're doing that. That means really something else. But these are traps and these are lies. And if you can just take some of this material into your afternoon, evening, and tomorrow, just to listen to your own words and find out, are you trying to guess what people are thinking? Are you trying to guess what their motives are? And again, catch yourself, because many times you're taking a negative spin on what people might be thinking or what their motives are. So we treat our own viewpoint, again, too charitably. If a coworker forgets to do a task, he's irresponsible. But if I forget to do it, I'm overworked. These are common reactions. Or we assume that behavior also equals bad character. This is such a trap for all of us, that if someone acts in an improper way, we assign it a character flaw. Or can call that person a control freak or manipulative. So negative assumptions often become self-fulfilling. One of the things that I have tried to work on through the years for myself, because many of us are people pleasers and want to make sure everybody is thinking well of us, to turn that around and say, don't worry about what others think of you, but worry about what you're thinking about others. It doesn't really matter what other people think of you, but it matters a lot about what you think of others. So those negative attitudes, the mind reading, the different things that we're talking about in bombing, they all make a difference in how we relate to others. And it is about self-care. This is an extension of self-care. There's things that we can do physically, but these are things that we can do emotionally and mentally to keep ourselves stable. So go on to the next one. This is the reflection. And then you can talk about the next one.
Okay, we're going to talk about branding, which is really called more commonly labeling or name calling. You probably have seen that. It's very common among political politicians. It's common sometimes in the workplace. It's especially common within families. And so kids will call each other names quite commonly. And occasionally you'll even hear a parent call names to each other. And that's very sad, but it is true. This is one particular type of name calling. She says, "You're so perfect." Perfect is a label. And it's a positive label, but the reality is that it is also labeling. And the problem comes that eventually no one is really perfect. So positive labeling, positive branding is also destructive because it's untruthful. It creates unrealistic expectations that someone's going to be perfect or they're never going to have a problem. And because of that, they don't need to plan. And so often, if we have positive labeling or positive branding, there's no proactive planning ahead of time. And sometimes we do it to ourselves. This is a good example of a negative labeling. If you were not such a slob, we wouldn't need a janitor. Slob is a label, naturally. And he responds, "Oh yeah, if you weren't such a spendthrift, we could afford a janitor as well as someone to replace you." So negative labeling as a slob or a spendthrift is childlike. You know, we did that as maybe third graders or fifth graders. Hopefully we're not doing it as adults, but the reality is that often we as adults, even if we don't say it, it's happening up here in our brain. We're mentally saying, "Oh, that person is a slob." We're labeling them. Ends up being character assassination. And what did Jesus say about character assassination? He said, anyone who calls his brother Raka, which means fool. When you call someone a fool, it's not what they are doing. It's not their behavior you're talking about. It's a character, deep character. It's what this person is to the core. And only God knows. Only Jesus knows what this person's like to the core. I don't even know what my wife is like to the core sometimes. I know her pretty well. But it's very easy for us to label someone thinking that we know this person totally. We don't. There's common ways we do it. We say, this guy's a little funny, he's an odd fellow. Who's the clown who did this? I used to say that. That is character assassination. Airhead or blonde jokes are character assassination. The bottom line is identify the offensive behavior and talk about the behavior, not a trait. Now, this works very well in a direct culture like we are in. But if you're a missionary in indirect culture, like where I was raised in Japan or anywhere in Asia, there's a real problem with that because you don't identify behaviors or traits to another person. So you need to modify this based on the culture because you may not have the option to identify a trait directly. It may have to be done indirectly, depending on the culture you're in. There are different ways that we do character assassination. This is a more of an insidious way. Why can't you ever remember? Why can't you ever remember anything? I told you 1,000 times to get fuel oil and you didn't. What's the character assassination there? The implication is this person doesn't care or is thoughtless. And so there's a character assassination going on, and we could make that as a complaint where he simply says, there's no fuel oil. What kept you from filling it or finding it like you said you would? So instead of you change that why word up front to a what word. What asked for data? Why is condemning, it's blaming, it's character assassination. This next one also starts with why. Insidious type of example. Why are you always so selfish? You just misled me. You should have told me earlier you didn't really know how to do this task. So anytime you hear a why word, we're going to talk about that more later. It's an imperative type statement. When you hear why, try to change those to what or how words, which are asking for data instead of being blaming or types of a character assassination. We want you to reflect a little bit. When were you last a victim of labeling or branding? You probably will think about that much quicker than when you were guilty of branding. But we invite you to take a little bit of time after this is all over with to think about these 7 different types of thought distortions and say, okay, I was guilty of doing this when, take time. Most of these, because these are the 7 big common ones. And so most of these are ones that you and I do. And so I ask you to take time to reflect on it. And then you can start saying, okay, how can I start editing this? Okay, we are probably within time of needing to go ahead and break this off. Return back to Grant. Let him finish because we're at about 10 minutes left in the seminar. And we continue the other 3 bombing elements next time.
I do have a question, Nathan and Beth. So suppose we're in a setting where a group is meeting, which could be 2 or 3, or more. And let's say that a branding situation takes place where somebody's being discussed and we sense, this really isn't right. This isn't settling within my spirit. There is something that's offensive and not kind about what's being said. This person's being labeled, branded. What should we do in a situation like that? And especially, let's say if it's a leader saying something.
It's very common in a work culture. I'm sad to say I've seen it in missionaries and among ministers possibly more than I saw when I worked with the Air Force. I worked with the Air Force for 29 years. My off the cuff reflection is, yeah, I saw it there too. I think I saw it less there. Maybe it's just, maybe the problem is that my
Just take it back to the
ministry
kitchen. I'll come
missionary.
up there in the kitchen and help you in a few minutes, okay?
And so maybe, but this is more recent. But when we see it, we need to change those words to what and how, instead of condemnation, blaming, character assassination, labeling, and say what could have been done, or how could this have been done to prevent it. And that will be a lot more proactive than labeling someone, because when you label someone, it's full stop right there. This person's bad, their character's bad, and so what only we can do is get rid of that person.
It's kind of it's an end of the road mark in a sense that once that has happened, to diffuse that is challenging. Once a person has been labeled or branded, unless you can get in with some question words of instead of whys to say, the help me understand, or, those kinds of phrases that we're all learning to use better as we're, understanding how we offend people so easily. But in that situation, especially like you're saying, a leader, I mean, that becomes very touchy, because you don't want to correct them publicly, because in so many cultures, they lose face in doing that. But certainly it would be a time to come up with some better words than why. Grant, maybe you have a good way to diffuse that. Though that's a very good, and it's a very real question, because it's happened to all of us, where we're the member of the team, we're not the leader, but someone is being discussed and character assassination is taking place in front of our eyes. So I'm throwing it out to someone else.
I'll get there. You know what crossed my mind, Beth, and this is just amazing stuff, but branding is a core technique, weapon of spiritual abusers. I mean, it's not only just labeling and shaming, then you're generalizing and making decisions on that label, on that branding. And I have to, I mean, I was at Evangel as a faculty member, we had committee meeting. And so there was a sense of autonomy and collegiality, and we would talk about things, and there was an environment in which to talk about your concerns that was intentionally created. And it goes, and I personally was not involved in any kind. I had one experience where someone falsely accused me of something, and I had to go to that person and we addressed the issue. But what I'm experiencing now, I haven't been part of a church. I was junior high pastor once with Pastor Wanamaker, and there was a lot of element of being able to discuss things. But I don't have a good answer on what happens if your leadership in a committee, in an organization, brands. And how do you correct and challenge that without coming across as insubordinate or whatever? I think I would start with the Matthew 18 thing. You go to the person privately and say, okay, I need to talk. Can we talk? I've done that a couple of times. But then what happens if it doesn't go there? Then you got to go to the next level, 2 or 3. And then after that, you're supposed to go to another level from a biblical perspective. But branding is a key tool of people that want to control people and organizations.
And it's extremely dangerous, and Jesus takes it up himself and talks about it.
Yeah.
So perhaps our best defense is to be using our best kinds of phraseology and words as we discuss and to edit out, and I think that's when we present these, it's like edit some of these things out of your speech if you possibly can, because you become then the leader, the example of this is how we speak about other people. We don't assume that we mind read or know their motives or brand or blame, or if we can get rid of it, it's a start. It's a start to a better way of communicating and expressing, because it's at some point it doesn't need to be tolerated. It is so often, because again, if the leader does it, it seems like it's okay.
Every person of these 7 will own a couple of these. And I had one missionary come to me after we taught this and say, you know, Nathan, I own real estate in all 7 regions here. And you know, what I told him was, understand that the first step is understanding and acknowledging that you are prone to one or more and what they are. The next step, and the most important step after that, is to go to your spouse or your best friend, say, I have this problem. I really do a lot of labeling or a lot of imperative statements or negative I'll own it, negative interpretation, because that's when I really excel. I can turn anything negative if I think about it. So I'll own that. And so so what did I do? I went to Beth and I said, Beth, I do this so well. I'm probably the world's best because of the culture I came from. That's what was honored. And so help me edit that. And she has. I still do it to this day. And she still to this day says, Nathan, you're interpreting that negatively. And so find someone, own up to what you're weak in, and find a spouse or a best friend who will say, yes, I will help you edit that, because it's going to be a lifelong task. Okay, Mark, we're back to you. Or Grant.
Grant. So if you could stop sharing your screen, Nathan, if Grant, you could take it from here.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what I want to do, come on. Oh, I know why is it not moving? There we go. This is a start of where we're going to head next week. And so understanding treating mental health issues in the church. And I won't take too long, but I definitely, we have a problem, and it's not getting better. Mental illness is rampant. An estimated 26% of Americans 18 and older have a diagnosed mental disorder. 1 in 4. Nearly 20% of children 3 to 17 have a mental illness, and 49% of teens, half the teens, have had at least an episode of some mental illness during their teen years. It is believed these numbers are going to get worse. COVID was a big issue. We saw a rise there. But when you talk about there being more abuse and neglect in families that's being reported, social media is just destroying so many people. We know there's a connection between screen time and lack of engagement with mental illness. Economic stress. People know, I thought I heard something like 65% of Americans today are paycheck to paycheck. It's for the first time ever over $1 trillion in credit card debt in the U.S. now. Our drug use is going up. There's more of acceptance of suicide and preoccupation with self-harm. So it's an issue, and it's not going to not be part of the church. It's part of the flock. And so the shepherds, we need to do something to help that. And there are many reasons and causes of mental illnesses. Okay. And I'm going to show a slide here in a moment. And it's just not an issue of faith issues or spiritual issues. In some sense, those are rare in creating mental illness. But pastors, clergy, ministers, religious leaders how many have been trained in addressing mental illnesses? In a Bible school, when they get credentials with a district, there's so many, you have to have this class, this class, this class. How many require a class in mental health issues? But yet over half your congregants may have problems with it. So that's what we're wanting to address, bring some tools, resources to you. And I'm just going to start it out with this. There's a slide of some of the causes. And the reason I'm saying we need to look at the causes, because the causes is what determines the treatment. I want to repeat that. If I have cancer and I treat that, but I got to figure out what kind of cancer it is. And then once we determine the type of cancer, then we know what treatment to use. But if you don't identify that, then you may get the wrong treatment. There are biological causes, and I'll give an example, autism, physiological causes, depression, environment. We know discrimination, unemployment, homelessness causes mental health issues. Medical condition. Oh, I forgot to put some there. Like, for instance, people that have heart transplants and heart surgeries are more prone to depression afterwards than pretty much any other medical surgery type thing. Trauma, abuse, neglect causes PTSD. Straightforward. Stress. Stress is probably the most common factor in creating mental health issues, mental disorders. And actually, because it adversely impacts the immune system. Drug abuse, we know that leads to anxiety. And I'm putting in spiritual abuse now. I am not being bashful about that. Spiritual abuse causes PTSD, depression, anxiety. And that's an environment. It's a type of environment. That's a discrimination environment. And my favorite is toxic guilt and shame. Almost all disorders have a component of toxic guilt and shame. And talked about that a little bit before, but here's something that I'm going in depth with, just so that you understand a little bit how complex mental illness, mental health issues are. We know there's a genetic factor in many disorders: autism, bipolar, major depression, schizophrenia, ADHD. Have a genetic loading. Schizophrenia has one of the highest genetic loadings, between 70 and 80%. So if you're a parent, grandparent, you have it, the 70, 80%. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to get it, but it has the highest genetic loading. It's in your DNA. Biological component or biochemical. These are disorders that are related to your brain chemistry. Anorexia, bulimia, bipolar, major depression, OCD, panic disorder, and psychotic disorders. And I kind of referenced that a little earlier. Like, for instance, depression is linked to low levels of serotonin and or norepinephrine. I used to kid in my intro to psych class to the students years ago. I said, you know what? I can make all of you depressed within a couple of weeks if I control your diet. And you're going to be depressed no matter how many people you save, how many A's you get, how you save the world, because I will remove tryptophan and tyrosine from your diet, and in 2 weeks you'll likely be depressed because your body doesn't have what it needs to create serotonin and norepinephrine. So physiological causes. We know there are certain infections that cause mental illness: brain injuries, prenatal damage, substance abuse, poor nutrition, and toxins. And I just referenced that. Diet poor in amino acids, tryptophan, and tyrosine leads to depression. And there are foods that you can eat that elevate those amino acids. So I'm closing with this kind of: the cause determines the treatment. And these that I've just referenced should be treated medically. Beyond my training as a psychologist or an anthropologist, some of these you need to see the medical doctor. You need to say, hey, I've got this. I just made another referral yesterday to a client, said, you know what? need to run this by your medical doctor. You haven't had a physical in a while. Let's get that physical, those annual physical, and see if she thinks you should do some antidepressants. So my conclusion, we will have more to say about the treatments next webinar on the 7th. And the key point I want to make, the cause of the disorder determines the appropriate treatment. And praise God, there are great effective treatments for mental illnesses today that we didn't have even 30 years ago. It's just, and the integration piece that we're going to focus on, where, like for instance, as I shared, there's the material world and the spiritual world, and God is the author of both worlds. So I don't have to be afraid of either world because he's the author if I'm pursuing truth. So when we as psychologists and counselors and even medical profession, we do our part in a team approach to treating mental health, mental illnesses. And this is what we want to do to help pastors, missionaries, leaders next week to begin to say, okay, when do I hold, when do I fold, and when do I walk away when it comes to working with your flock and the sheep? And I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Grant, Nathan, and Beth. This was excellent. I encourage you all, as I will, go back and reflect on this, watch it again, take down the things that spoke to your life so that you can better yourself, so that you can also help other people as well. And again, we want to encourage you next August, this coming August 7th at noon. So Wednesday, as we usually meet, we're going to be talking about the dynamics of mental health and in the ministry and in missions, and particularly looking at these other areas of how we can be able to integrate faith and the dynamic of spiritual forces of darkness. That's a component that we're going to bring into it as well. That's an absolute reality, and we need to carefully discern that between what's mentally ill, what's the enemy, and also, as our panels brought out as well, what is impacting us by what we're eating and how much we're sleeping. There are so many things that we need to look at in our bodies, our minds, our soul, our spirit, because we're living in a world that we were never meant to live in. We're living in a fallen world, and we're living as humans created in the image of God in a place that has a lot to war against us. And there's a lot in our culture. There's a lot in our systems that we work in, and there's a lot in our family background that contribute to areas of our life that we need deep reflection on and to become the mentally whole people that God wants us to be. So take note of that, share this with other people. Again, this will be embedded at our Institute for Ministerial Wholeness website at www.iamwholeness.org. And we look forward to being with us again. Again, thank you again, Nathan, Beth, and Grant. This was excellent today. I know I've gleaned things from it and taken notes. And I just want to say it's great that officially that Grant, Nathan, and Beth have come on our IMW team, and they are going to be on our website. And if you want to reach them, you'll be able to go and find their email addresses and connect with them for any kind of counseling questions that you may have. And so with that, we're going to say thank you. It's great being with you today, and we're here to serve you. If you want to touch base with us in the future, don't hesitate to do that. We're here to serve you. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.